Morning, everyone. Welcome back to IMG Australia channel. This is the third video on the series of videos regarding my experience in Australian healthcare system, especially about the hospital system so far. As if you can remember, I have told you how I did the exams and then how I entered the hospital system. The last video was about me pushing in to get a job in the hospital system. So today I'll be discussing mainly about how I navigate the HMO work and the registrar work within a Australian hospital. Okay, let's start. So from my memory, I think I did hospital rotations for almost 4 years, from 2014 to 2019. Yeah, 18. Sorry, not 2019, 2018. So 14 to 18, 4 years. Most of the work I did in the local hospital here, like it's only 5 kilometers from my home. And then there's some work done in a private hospital for full year as a registrar. It's also only 4 to 5 kilometers from my home. So let's start. After my interview and successful interview in Bendigo-based hospital, I just entered the emergency department. My first ever rotation in a Australian healthcare setting was at the Bendigo emergency department. Interestingly, I just started as I just started my roster like a HMO who's doing 7 night shifts under a registrar. You know, in night shifts in a emergency department, it's generally run by a registrar. There will be a consultant on site in an emergency, but generally the registrar will run the show for whole night. And then he will get at least 1 or 2. I think it was 2 HMOs with him when I did the rotations in the night. Those days, the Bendigo-based hospital is not so busy like now. It was busy, but still it's not like now. Now people would be waiting for more than 4 hours most of the time. But those days, we managed to run it within 4-hour rule. Sometimes you get a little bit of spare time in between, especially late in the night, like early morning, but not anymore. It's like running 24/7 all the time. The waiting area is full and the beds are full, and then it's really a pressure cooker. Even those days, it's really pressurized situation. And then luckily or unluckily, I got this registrar as my supervisor to work in the night. It was interesting, but we did manage okay. And as you know, we learn as you work. That's the setting in Australian hospital system. So he's a bit of a, like, bit talkative and, like a loud presenting guy. I was a bit different, as you can see. I'm just quite soft spoken, but we manage okay from my memory. And then the 3 months rotation, I did all the shifts. I started with nights and then day shifts. Some of the day shifts run from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Some run from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then some rotation, there was another shift from 2 p.m. to from 2 to a time, probably around 2 to 11. And then there's another one, you start a bit late and finish at 2 in the morning. So I did almost all those shifts within those 3 months. First rotation in emergency. I don't know whether you guys can remember, I told you there's critical evaluation times in rotation in Bendigo, or Bendigo Health, or a hospital, in hospital Australian system. So the first evaluation comes at 6 weeks mark, and then another one in 12 weeks marks. So that 12 weeks mark, they evaluate you as a IMG, or international medical graduate, who's coming into the Australian health system. That evaluation is very important because it just goes to AHPRA from your supervisors saying that this guy is at the level of expected level of practice, or he's not quite at the level, or he's rarely they would say he's more than expected, but generally they put you at the expected level or close by. For me also, there's not so many hiccups, but there's a few things I will discuss later. But I just did the first rotation with emergency department, have had that evaluations. Both of the evaluations were done by specialists or the consultants. One was by a usual consultant who's always in the floor, and then the other was by the, you remember the supervisory guys I mentioned in the previous video, like the deputy directors. So one of them did the second evaluation. Then we went to do other rotations. From my memory, I did psychiatry rotation as the second one. It's a full-on one again, acute psych unit. Those days, the acute psychiatry unit in Bendigo Health was called Alexander Bain Center, or ABC. It was a different building in the same premises. Now it's different. Now the psychiatry unit again is located within the big hospital premises. It's a big building. In the second floor, you have the psychiatry unit currently. But our days, it was the old hospital. So I did navigate the psychiatry rotation okay. I think I was under a locum consultant. I was the HMO for him. And then we did a lot of work there, and I learned a lot about managing acute psych scenarios. That was my second rotation. And then I think the third one was the relief HMO. If you guys haven't heard about what relief means, relief HMO is the HMO who's covering for annual leave of the other HMOs. So some HMO one HMO from emergency may go on leave for 3 weeks, then you cover that. And then another HMO from oncology unit may go on leave for 2 weeks. I actually covered that too. So I did a lot of emergency again as a relief HMO, almost half of the rotation, plus oncology, then GEM on acute, which is geriatric medicine in acute medicine unit, and I think nephrology too. Yeah, like, dialysis and things, which we covered either for 1 or 2 weeks, I can't remember. But anyway, I did all those things, and some surgical nights. So night HMO. That was my third rotation. The last one was night HMO, so in a medical unit. So I did a medical nights. Medical nights in hospital here is interesting because you will be the guy who will be approached by the nurses in the night. They ask you to mainly come in and help with cannulation, the cannula who went, which went out, you need to be sort of do a new cannula and get the IV fluid and IV antibiotics going. And then sometimes they call you for other scenarios, like if just prior to what we call a MET call, medical emergency team call, they will contact the HMO night. If the HMO night can manage it and settle it, they won't call a med call. But if even if with your management the patient deteriorate, then they will make it a med call, medical emergency team call. So you are a part of a medical emergency team as well. When they call a med call, when the nurses call a med call, you go and help the other team members who are actually emergency registrar, ICU registrar, anesthetic registrar, and sometimes surgical as well. And the medical registrar, of course. So those were the rotations I did for the first year. And then they were not enough for me to get the full registration. If you guys can recall, I entered the Bendigo Health with AMC Part 1, Part 2, English. So I was eligible for provisional registrations under AHPRA. So I was having a provisional registration under AHPRA. And then I wanted to do these rotations. That's why I asked the hospital director guy at that time to give me some rotations so that I can complete my full registration. So he offered this 1 year. And then once you've done this 1 year of rotations, then the HMO unit said to me, I wanted to have the full registration, but they put forward a proposal to me to say, okay, if you go to Swan Hill District Health, which is a seconded appointment from the Bendigo Health, you will be eligible to fulfill your requirement for the full registration, which is, I have already done emergency almost 4 months maybe. So you need at least 6 months of emergency. If you do 6 months of emergency, AHPRA recognizes as 3 months of emergency, 3 months of surgery, and 3 months of pediatrics. So what you're lacking is medical rotations. I don't think AHPRA recognizes psychiatry or medical night as medical rotations. So you need to do a full medical rotation. So they offered me, if you go to Swan Hill, and if you cover the emergency department there as HMO, that will fulfill your requirement. And then on the back of my mind, I wanted medicine as well. So there was a medical rotation in Swan Hill Medical Ward. So I went for 6 months of rotations in Swan Hill, which had emergency 3 months and medical rotations at 3 months. Swan Hill Hospital, emergency and the medical wards were run by GPs, like they call VMOs, visiting medical officers. So they are the kind of specialist covering the emergency department and the medical ward. So I trained under them, and then I did 3 months of emergency and 3 months of medicine. After that, I was eligible to apply for AHPRA for full registration. So I got the full registration with AHPRA. In fact, within probably 15 months of entering into the hospital system, because by that time I have covered 1 year of in Bendigo Health with almost 4 months of emergency, plus that added 3 months of emergency from the Swan Hill Hospital was actually enough for AHPRA, although I thought my medical nights were not recognized. It sounds like they recognize it. Plus, like I did oncology, I did nephrology, and then I did gem on acute few weeks here and there. So that was enough for AHPRA to say, okay, this guy had enough rotations to get him full registration. So I got full registration within probably about 15 months into the hospital system. So it is important here, this point is very important for international medical graduates. Once you become fully registered with AHPRA, you kind of a freebie, because people can't sort of bully you or tell you anything because you've got full registration. That means you can apply for different jobs elsewhere. You could do locum jobs, you could become a GP trainee, or you could do like relief work in private hospitals or many things you can do once you get the full registration. So after I got that full registration, I actually registered as a locum doctor too, although I never done locum so far, but I'm still registered with, I think, MedRecruit or something, some sort of locum agency. They keep sending me emails, but I never did any locum work. After that 6 months, I came back to Bendigo Health, and then they gave me a few other rotations for the next 6 months. That included another seconded appointment, which is to cover Echuca Hospital medical wards for 3 months. So it was not any necessity for me to do that, but for registration purposes, but to keep your job going, that's why I went to Echuca Hospital for 3 months. And then for 2017, that was 2014, 15, and then 16. And then for the 17, I got a full year's rotation in Bendigo Health. Every time you apply for new rotations, you have to face an interview and go through application and all this, but they generally know you well because you're in the system, so you can continue working there. But when I applied for the 4th year, the interview panel included, strangely, one of those ED consultants was there. He actually asked, what do you want to do, Kirti? How many rotations you want? Do you want to become a medical registrar? At the interview, he asked, but I said, no, I don't like medical registrar work because it's a lot of work, right? I didn't tell him, but I just said, I don't like medical registrar to be a medical registrar. But I said, if you can give me these rotations, I can fulfill the requirement to go to general practice. One of the things I asked was the pediatrics. And then another thing I asked, I thought about for a brief moment, I thought I would join the GP practice as an AHPRA GP, you know, like the GPs who are doing procedures and emergency evacuations and things, like rural GPs. If you go that path, you need to have a lot of hands-on experience with, you know, like central lines and PIC lines and intubation and like anesthetic sort of skills. So I asked him if you can organize anesthesia rotation and a pediatric rotation. These are the things I wanted to do in my 4th year. And then he said anesthesia is a training program, which you can't do. He suggested me medical registrar work. But somehow I just decided, I think from my memory, they actually continued for that last year. And then there was, during that time, I was HMO there, but like, you know, different people come and presenting different things. And then GP training program, which is called MCCC. It's no longer there, but it was like the Murray City Country Coastal GP training, which is the training I did finally. And they came and presented to the HMOs in Bendigo Health one day. And then they told, we encourage you guys to apply for GP training. Like a lot of HMOs were there, and then all these consultants were there, including that ED director guy. And then one of the ladies who came, I think she was a GP or a GP trainer. And then she said, you guys have to cover pediatrics, surgery, medicine, and ED to become GPs. And then I just stood up then, and then I said, I have done many rotations, but unfortunately, I haven't done a specific pediatric rotation. I have covered a lot of pediatric experience in the emergency department. Is that enough for GP training? Then she kind of gave an answer. It would be, but on paper, it will not be. Okay. For AHPRA, the emergency is enough to consider as you've got enough pediatric experience, but for GP training, you need a full rotation of pediatrics, like 3 months. I have done orthopedic in between. I asked, is it good enough for surgery? Then they said, no, you need a full surgical rotation. Unfortunately for HMOs, we don't have a HMO position as a HMO surgery during the day. I did HMO nights in the surgical ward, but it was not counted. And then I had a dilemma of whether I will do surgery in a different place. I was offered to do surgery in Echuca Hospital by the Echuca people, not by the Bendigo Health. And at the same time, while I was doing rotations here, I managed to get a pediatric rotation. It's actually that ED director who told me, Kirti, there's a pediatric rotation available. Are you interested? And then I said yes, and then I joined the ped HMO rotation. So I did 3 months of pediatric HMO rotation. But what I was lacking for GP training was the surgery. So then I had this dilemma of whether I do that surgery and become a GP in, I don't know whether you guys are aware, like international doctors got 2 pathways to go into GP training. One is the Rural Workforce Agency, or RWAVE, or Rural GP Pathway. And the other one is you join the GP training as if you join as a local graduate does, which is the AGPT, Australian GP Training Pathway. So I had the option either do the exams and join the AGPT pathway, or go back to Echuca and do a bit of surgery there, and then join the other pathway for GP training, which is the usual pathway taken by most of the international graduates. So I was in a dilemma, but at the same time, I have done 1 rotation in the private hospital here, Bendigo Health, and not the Bendigo Health, the one attached or had some relationship with the Bendigo Health, St. John of God Hospital. Then once I do that 1 rotation, the director of the St. John of God Hospital, ED, he got friendly with me and he suggested, Kirti, don't go to Echuca for 1 year because you're away from here, but join us. And then while you join us as a registrar for ICU, you could do your exam preparation. Finally, I decided I won't go to Echuca to do a surgical rotation, but I came to the private hospital here, and then I did practice for the exams to entry to the AGPT pathway, which is the usual GP training pathway taken by the Australian medical graduates. International graduates can also join that. For that, they need full registration with AHPRA, and then you should be a permanent resident or a citizenship holder, which I was. So I could do the AGPT training. So that's how I completed my hospital training. So I started from Bendigo Health, 1 year of full rotation and 6 months in Swan Hill. That gave me the eligibility to do the full registration with AHPRA, which I did. And then I continued to do a few more rotations in Bendigo Health until I find a way to go to the GP training, which is after doing ped rotations with Bendigo Health, plus doing exams while I was working as a registrar in a private hospital. So in 2018, I think it's 4 years after joining the hospital system, I became a GP registrar. So that's the hospital pathway in a nutshell for myself. One more thing I would like to discuss is every 3 months, they will do your assessment while you're doing these rotations, which went okay, not bad. One fine occasion, I had an issue, one of the supervisors asking the questions like, are you behaving like Sri Lankan doctors? And Are you treating nurses differently? And then I had to ask him, what are you talking about? Have you taken this 360-degree assessment? Have you spoken to the nurses? Have you spoken to the other doctors and younger doctors and doctors who are in the referral pathways, like medical registrars and everyone? Without talking to them, it's no point you telling me I'm behaving like Sri Lanka. And then I just put the argument backward to him, and then he agreed. And so you could talk about these things with your supervisors if you know your rights and responsibilities as HMO. Okay, I think that would give you some idea about the hospital system in Australia. We'll meet again with the GP training experience.